What we thought we'll do is to give in a moment, a time to maybe questions you may have had while going through the online component that may not have been very clear. So this time is for that. So if you can, I'll help you to refresh your memory. I know this was 2 months ago. But if there are issues specifically with certain classrooms that we put, then you could ask those for the benefit of everybody. And the idea is not that I will answer them, but that we will all answer it together because all of you are also familiar with all of the content. Yeah. So I just wanted to share with you the lesson plan and how we put together the online phase, right? So we went through the entire, so this course was designed as a face-to-face course for face-to-face facilitation. So we took that course and broke it down into a lesson plan for developing content to put online, right? So the first stage, like in any teaching program that all of you I'm sure are involved in, you think through a lesson plan first. So that's what we did with this, with GHRP as well. And we put in a lesson plan that looks something like this, right? So for each module, we have learning objectives. Then we break down the entire module into units, and we have learning objectives for each of the units. And then finally, the unit is broken down into classrooms or learning activities. It could be reading materials or other things that have been discussion forums, things like that to facilitate the learning. All of this is thought through, and there is an opportunity to think this even more with all of you. So that is something you can also apply your minds to in the next few days, is alignment of this and having good pedagogy here, right? So how we are thinking through achieving these objectives and whether our classrooms and activities are achieving these objectives or not. The units, therefore, and this is of course what you've already been through, each of the modules were divided into 3 or 4 units and the topics for the different units. Yes, all of you are familiar with this up till now, and this is what you've been following along in the online phase. Each of the units is then broken down into classrooms. So when it says M1, U1, I mean module 1, unit 1, the topic, and then what were the classrooms within that. So in this particular session, I'll stick to the first 2 modules up till essential documents and maybe data collection. And tomorrow again, we have half an hour for this kind of a Q&A where we'll talk through data management, study management, and the other parts, the module 4 of the course, right? So basically, I want you to think through and recall and revise some of the things that were dealt with in these classrooms. So in the first unit, the first 2 classrooms were on understanding the international guidelines and where GHRP fits into or why we needed GHRP and how GHRP fit in. So pertaining to that, if you have any questions, any doubts, any clarifications, then you can ask. Otherwise, then I will, like that, move through each of these sets of classrooms. So anything you would like to, was that clear? Do you know which classrooms I'm talking about? Yes.
I'm just trying to recall if for the international guidelines where we had extra documentaries that were used.
Yes.
That was good.
That was good. Okay.
The use of the extra documentaries to support the learning process was good. I wanted to mention that.
All right. So the additional learning, reading material wherein we gave all the various documents, the Helsinki,
It was actually not reading material. It was a video, like these videos that were added. Yeah. Some on ethics. Yeah.
Oh, that is syphilis study. Yeah, that's where we start from. Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I also found that very helpful and very illustrative. Yeah. And I remember we mentioned that, I mentioned that with some colleagues. And for me, was also very helpful to really understand what you were saying this morning about the use of the purpose of GHRP, different from clinical stuff, from the GCP.
Yeah. Very nice. So yes, that's very useful because that will help us then firm up the course further. Yes, so I recall that there were some on, for example, the radiation and the pregnant women study. Those were the examples of the documentaries that you were talking about. All right. Okay. Then the second unit was on principles of ethics, and we talked about principles of research ethics. We spoke about quality principles in this unit. So any questions, any feedback from this particular 2 classrooms? I think it's a very basic one, so I think it was quite okay. I think we spoke about the 4 basic principles of research ethics: the autonomy, justice, beneficence, and what were the 3? Maybe instead of me, you all could recall. Yeah, autonomy was one. Justice, beneficence, or non-maleficence. So those were the 4 basic principles that we spoke about. And then we talked about how this is applied. So, for example, how is autonomy applied, or how do we operationalize autonomy? Through informed consents, yeah. So we spoke about those and how these are operationalized, okay? And then when we talked about quality, can you recall some of the things in this classroom? Difficult.
Yeah, I think for that one, what really stuck with me was how to ensure quality through capacity building, like training of the research staff. I think that was a new thing that I picked up. Yeah.
But did you get that whole concept of quality? What does quality mean? What is quality assurance? What's quality management system? Did you get all these concepts from there? I think it's recall issues. It's now really
struggling
2 months after the whole thing. So one of the things maybe we should also do in this kind of is for us to let them know, look, please make a note of all your points, so then when you come here you can let us know. Yeah, that would be good. So
yeah.
Okay. But if not today, you get any questions or you get any suggestions, you can always keep note of all this, because on the last day we are also going to be revisiting.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe when you are free in the evening, just think through and then make a list of those points, right?
Yeah. I'm sure if you look at the presentations or the videos a little bit, even not go through it thoroughly, I'm sure you will remember, oh, I thought of this at that time. So if you can make a note of those kind of things, it would be very helpful for us. And there's again half an hour tomorrow slotted for, like I said, module 3 and 4. So if you could also do that in preparation already. Okay, then we spoke about the project manager. I think that had some videos in it on the role of a project manager. And we talked about moving from the research to the project mode. So thinking through how we move from research and the scientific aspects of it into now thinking of management and the project mode. Were those clear, meaning in the sense the transition from research to then project management? Any questions related to that?
You have experience with the facilitation of a face-to-face. So how did you feel? Did they get that point very clear that we're talking about 2 different aspects? We're not talking about the research, we're talking about research as a project and how important it is that has to be managed for us to be successful in our research. Did you get that difference?
Well, the problem is I'm a facilitator, so I think it's let's say
opinion is already colored.
Yes, I think El Reni knew some of the concepts, so but in general, I think for this one, because I also have recall issues. For the one of the project mode, I think it was most a project related video, if I recall correctly. It was more, so maybe that needed to be a little bit integrated into the principles of quality, or how that contributes to quality, because it was more a presentation of project management itself. But let's say that I sort of overlooked that a little bit because I already am a facilitator of the other course, but yeah.
When Maria said that she liked it and she saw the risk assessment today, that there's this explicit distinction between the research and the project. So what we're trying to understand is, did you get this from looking at the videos, or was it made more explicit listening this morning to say, okay, there's something quality and ethics related at these two levels. Did you get the message when you saw the video?
I think I got it. It was really clear that we are talking about two different things. The only issue is that at a point I just wonder whether it is relevant to me. Will I have all my time as a researcher? Will I have all my time committing to managing a project? Is the question I keep asking. Or I would prefer somebody manage the project when I think about the science and the techniques for the research.
Yeah, we fully will understand. This is one of the biggest excuses that researchers give, saying that I am like a researcher, I look at the science. And a lot of failure of the projects are because we didn't have somebody to manage it. You're perfectly right. You don't have to be doing the two tasks. But so long as you identify this is important and I'm not going to do it, I'm going to hire somebody to be able to do that, is fine. Right? So you'll see more of it in the roles and responsibilities. But what we fail to do is that focus only on the science and completely ignore the project. And the reason why we integrated the two of them, and we want you to think that they are two parallel tracks and both of them are essential for success.
And especially so for those of us who teach as well. Yeah, so teaching is big, research is big,
Then
project management, big.
Yes.
You cannot do it all.
Yes. I'd just like to add to that also as PIs, finally responsibility rests with us. So even though we may delegate the tasks, we need to be able to know what is it to follow up with somebody. So in that sense, it's important to know these roles and what we
Yes, I fully agree with that, because we can delegate the task, but anyway we'll be responsible for it.
We are into a lot of multi-country, everything is like global. We are finding solutions to local problems, but we seem to be working at a global level. So I think project management seems like really a very critical component, and that really impacts participant safety and data quality as well. And that's why we have this two-step.
But I think that's a very nice point that probably that needs to come in through is how does it matter to us as researchers and because we don't see ourselves doing these roles. So I think that's important. Then moving ahead, the next unit was on study planning, and we already began to talk, essential documents. And we're talking about the essential document list, the research protocol headings, and risk assessment. So risk assessment, we've already had a recap and classroom in the morning, and we've already worked on it a little bit. If there are any questions related to essential documents and the protocol in particular. So were the protocol elements clear? And did that come out? Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that was good and mentioned, I don't know whether it was somebody mentioned that it is country specific. So some of these things, it's difficult for you to just give an outline, and especially even the order that it's supposed to be presented. It depends on the country, and even for us, it depends on the IRB board that you are submitting to. So the specificities come depending on where you are submitting to as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think those were rather straightforward classrooms in the sense of there's a list of documents that are usually required before the study, during the study, and then after the study. And in the research protocol, again, it's about the headings that we are all familiar with when we put protocols together. Yeah. Then there was, then of course, the informed consent, and the informed consent we will do in much more detail in the afternoon as well. But if there anything that you remember from the classrooms that you want to highlight?
Something that I want to say in general is not from a specific, but that I remember is that I participate once in the course, in the face-to-face course, in the GHRP course, and I remember that most of participants would feel that it was very long, you know, like 4 days, and then I found that the videos actually do a really good job summarizing like the key elements. So I like that because I think, oh, this is a good way to cover the important things in a compile and fast way. So I remember that in these aspects, it was my first feeling like, okay, is it possible to cover all in a very simple way with the key aspects? So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, and I think the last one was on, the last one for now, for just now's discussion is on the data collection tools and various sources of data and how do we collect it. Of course, we will also do an exercise on this later, and you will be thinking through data collection tools. So again, if there are questions, we can take them then also. But if there's anything in particular from the videos that you remember, or whether the concepts came out clearly or not.
I think at a point in time it was confusing in terms of the data collection tools that are appropriate for qualitative as against quantitative. It was confusing, and especially so when you got to the exercise in pooling and trying to match them. There were those that I, from my experience, would have put them somewhere, but you do it and it says, no, no, no. Yeah, so yeah, I think we need to have a second look at that. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right. Of course, risk assessment, we'll do the discussion a little later. And the module 3 and module 4, like I said, if you can refresh your memories and if there are any things to highlight, make a note of it. We'll do this tomorrow in the first half hour. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think it would be good then to have that recap, and then I will go through to try to remember, because I was unprepared for this. But it's just a general feeling. I think it was with the second module and the third that it was more like a general feeling that it was not quite integrated. It was like very fragmented. So I don't know, maybe it was because it was different people presenting one module and the other, but I felt that it was not, because when you do the face-to-face, it's very clear where you're heading to, and I didn't feel that. And yes, but I cannot give like a specific module because I just don't remember, but that was my feeling.
I mean, we have this discussion before, and at that time we decided to have, I think we discussed that it's good one module be presented one person, but then because of other things we decided to do that. But I think that's the way we will go. Yeah.
So, and what about, for example, as we use this wheel, I don't know the name of it. It's like a wheel that this is module, this is what we have been covering. Maybe that will be helpful.
So I think making the connection. So I think from what Maria says is like how I link this topic to the previous one and how I lead it on to the next one. So we need to make that linkage so then we understand the integration. And at every topic we say, okay, if you're talking about protocol, it's not about the elements. We're talking about quality of a protocol. So if a protocol needs to be of quality, so what are the elements? Right? And the way you write your protocol, how does it affect the ethics, the safety of the participants? So what do you do about it? So it's these two principles that we need to focus at every point and make a connection to the previous and to the next one. So it's like a chain. And I think in that sense, that wheel is really very, very, where are we now? Where are we now? Where are we progressing? I think that's very, very valid.
Also, in terms of the general, I have been wondering the use of the forum. I went in there a few times and I don't know whether I was supposed to start a conversation, follow a conversation, but I was thinking that it's a very good way of integrating whatever we are learning, like bringing it all together for us. But I go in there and there is nothing, and I don't know how to start. So I wanted to find out what were our thoughts and how we wanted to engage participants through the forum.
So to be very honest, I think discussion forum wasn't, we didn't use it as one of the learning activities for this set of thing, but it is definitely something we can explore, and probably for the next versions or the revised versions, we can use that. It's a very effective tool, I can say from the experience of our other courses. So we stimulate discussions, we put in a thought or a scenario, and we ask students to respond. And the discussions are quite interesting sometimes. Or we ask them to post some things into discussion forum and have peers review it. So that's the way we have used discussion forums before, but in this we didn't plan it as one of the learning activities, so that's why the confusion.
It was just a similar comment because I've been in a GCP B-learning module, and then what we have done is to put like a case for
yes,
discussion.
that's ideally how it's used.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
And that is something we can explore to use with this also, I think that is where we should use it.
Be the devil's advocate. How did you like those exercises at the end of each learning? You had a set of multiple choice questions that you were asked to go through. You like that kind of approach, or you have another suggestion?
I think I liked it, except for a few technical issues. That I still get this email that says that I'm not done with one exercise, but I'm done with it. I'm done with it. I can actually go to the dashboard to show that I'm done, but it says I'm not done. But apart from that, I think it was good because it's quick. It's not something that takes away so much time from you to go answer them, but I think that they were good. Yeah.
Sorry, for the GHRP exercises, it was clear and very easy, honestly. But for the ER, we will discuss about.
Well, I also think that the exercises were very straight to the point and useful. However, I realized that some of the questions did not relate to what was taught in the classroom.
There were some questions that were not relating to...
No.
Yeah, we'll look at that.
Some of the question with like matching the question and an answer, if the answer is same but we match it in the different column, it will be wrong answers.
Yeah, and I also want to say that I think it's okay. I prefer those kind of quizzes, like quick multiple choice quizzes, and with the experience that we have with the MOOC, for example, at the first version we had quizzes like this, and then for Module 3 and Module 4 we had assignments, and what happened is that a lot of people drop out during those modules. So it was very evident. Once the assignment was more, it took more time, so people quit. And the other thing is that we also have problems with assignment in Module 3. Yeah. And you can see, because I failed, she failed, and I tried several times, and I said, I even didn't try 3 times, only twice, because I said I don't want to answer anything else. But it's in the IR. It's in the IR. Yeah, I'm sorry, I confused. Yeah.
I mean, Maria, that's a very good point that you brought up. But what I was trying to see is that these questions are just testing your rote learning. And that's like good immediately after you go through. But maybe they're not the best for application. So I'm just trying to see how we can use some questions here and then link these questions to your discussion forum. So kind of put up a case scenario and then say, okay, can you put your thoughts to this particular case scenario on the discussion platform? And then you can start using your discussion platform. Different people may have different perspectives, and then the facilitator can try to do something. So that way it's application oriented. Of course, yes, it's heavy on the administrator, on the facilitator, but that's the kind of learning that is also important. So you feel happy, I got 5 out of 5, I got 100%, but that doesn't mean so much a little later. I feel it will be nice that we have not very lengthy exercises, but some kind of case scenarios that could then be discussed on the discussion platform.
Yeah, so I was thinking about that, and another thing that I was thinking about was how can we have questions that are actually related to what we are doing now in terms of the protocol. So as I'm going through the classrooms, do I need to come up with a topic? Do I need to come up with search questions, objectives, so that by the time I'm here, at least I've done some thinking into the processes as well?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's something we were also discussing, that would be nice if you could already begin to work on pieces as the classrooms are going by, so that when you come here, it's already in some shape and it's not like totally from scratch.
Yeah.
And then we have much more rich discussions on really nitty-gritties of it rather than just outlines again. So yeah, I think that's
and we plan to
do.
go into the direction
Yeah.
that we also try to ask the participant to also start thinking the project. Yeah.
But the feedback on the MCQs, I think, was very useful, because this is a discussion we've often had with our other courses as well, is how much of this knowledge assessment should we do, because it is quick. It may be a little dirty, but it's quick, and it's something that doesn't put people off that much, rather than long assignments or things that really become intensive for them to work on. So I think the key is the balance, and I think we need both. But to be able to balance it and have enough of application as well as assess knowledge, I think we need to put both in there.
The other bit with the MCQs is also thinking, do we really want just 3 attempts? How much of these attempts do we want? And is it really progressive? Like, if I'm not able to, do I progress anyway? Because it's the learning that is important, or whatever. I think that we need to also clarify.
Usually we give, I mean, this was a lot of debate in terms of 5, 3 and things like that. The idea behind 3 was, I mean, usually we don't, if you write to us and say, can we try it, and then we give 1 or 2 more attempts. The idea is, sometimes people do multiple choice, they play around with it, and do random testing and go around with it. So it also restricts you in saying, oh, I've only got 1 more attempt. But the idea is not to stop learning at that point, but the idea is to kind of encourage you to try, but try it with a bit of limitation.
But thank you for bringing that up, because the Moodle platform actually gives us a lot of options in how many restrictions we can do, what kind of attempts we can do, what should be allowed after which. So it's really useful thinking through in the learning path how it figures and how much of it does it stimulate for learning.
I think in the last day we could potentially explore
we'll look at some of these
scenario
options.
Based on your experience also, what is the best thing to be done, and how we can create that learning path which is more effective.
What if, because at the end there is a review of what you get right and wrong. So I didn't have much problems with this one, but with IR, I did. So there'll be a time for that, I guess. But what if in the feedback there is like a short explanation of why this? Because for the IR, I was like, but why not?
Yeah.
And then that'd be good.
Yeah, absolutely. Structured feedback is something that people use as a learning tool itself. So activities that are built in with structured feedback could just be the learning. We don't really need to do a classroom. So if they are point taken, I think we can look at that more. Is much more.
Wrong, then it takes you to why you are wrong, and it rationalizes. So then it's not like
and
it doesn't stop as a yes no kind of a thing. It really provides you with the opportunity to rationalize. That's very good.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say, but not related with the quizzes, but I found very very useful the final summary that you did at the end of each classroom, because sometimes I kind of get lost in the middle of the video, and then at the end, now I see what are the 2 points that I need to. So it was very useful, really.
All right. Yeah, that's a very useful point. Yeah, useful feedback. Okay, so if there are not any other really, but please continue to think about this, and then we'll have time tomorrow, and also you can share your feedback in between as well for the GHRP. So then, I think we've already overshot time. Yeah.
We take 1 hour. Yeah. 1 hour from now, and then we come back at 1:40, hoping that we will have our Filipino colleagues with us by then. Hoping, fingers crossed. So let's see.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Okay, take 1 hour break, and then we meet again. Our presentation. Okay. Are you all ready for some listening, or you think you need to do a little bit of a baby shark dance that Winnie will lead us into? Because Yodi has also said that we need to have some fun. We can't be all the time just sitting and doing our activity. We need to move as well, right? Yeah? You do? Okay. You have it on? You don't have it?
The audio visual is broken. So
Ah.
we can use from the video by plug on the audio visual from the machine. So I'm sorry, we can show up from the video at the moment because just blow up the second laptop.
Ah, there's some problem then
Yes.
here on their system.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We are extremely sorry. Looks like the audio isn't working. There's some problem. There's been like one after another. The computer crashes as well. So anybody has a nice activity that we could do? Just stretch your legs, move around, do something. Who can lead this kind of an activity? Would be nice to just get up a little bit. Because I fear I can see the attention levels are going down a little bit now. So we need to kind of boost all of you. Maybe just get up. Veni? Yeah, Wafa, you will be able to lead some activity. You're a good dancer. Okay. There's no music. That's the problem because otherwise we would have actually shown you something. Huh? Yeah. So just get up.
What kind of music do you want?
From any of your mobile phones, otherwise we can have a music. Yeah? Anybody has any music on your mobile phone? But just get up. Let's just get up. And then who is it who's good? Okay, let's just stretch our arms. The right one, maybe the left one. He can come and do some dance moves. The DJ, please come here. Please come here. Yeah. Yeah. Then maybe move your shoulders. Yeah. And then maybe do some activity. Maybe some jumping jacks as well. Yeah. Do something. Yes. Yes. And then maybe these kind of rotational movements. Right? Yeah. Maybe some bending, some stretching, some activity. Yeah? Okay. Yuri always does this. Write your name with your right leg. Then he says write your name with your left leg. Then he says write your name with your right hand. Like this, So kind of all these rotational movements. So a little bit. We wanted to do it with good fun. There's a very nice baby shark dance, but unfortunately the system crashed. Yeah. Okay. So we have a lot more time to do our exercise, and this first exercise is just the beginning. There are 2 groups ready. Let's first start listening to them, and if we have time, then the third group could also present. And this risk assessment, there's no end to it. This will go on and on at every exercise. So the next one that you do on data collection tools, you're again going to look at it. So this is just to stimulate discussion. So let's start with Colombia. Yeah, let's start with Colombia.
Okay, so we did the exercise related with the risk part, not the ethical yet.
Can we have the talking outside, please?
Okay, so if you remember, we are now focusing on the part where on the measuring the effectiveness of treatment for cutaneous leishmaniasis in rural area. So we identify as risk of the at the study level. What? Oh. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. So remember that we presented this morning a big project. So we are going to be concentrated in the treatment follow-up in the third objective. And for that, we are going to use apps and community health volunteers. So as risk, we identify at study level, we identify loss of confidentiality or confidentiality issues. Thank you. How does this work? Oh yeah, yeah. Confidentiality confidentiality issues related, because we are going to collect information from patients, so we have to consider some confidentiality issues, and to minimize the risk, we are planning to work to anonymize the data and use codes for enrollment of patients, and also our apps are considering the encryption of the data to protect the information. So we also may have some privacy issues with the information. So we want to be sure, as a measure to minimize risk, that we are going to train staff, which is community leaders and health personnel, to understand the importance of how to manage the information of patients to preserve privacy. And also another risk is that maybe we can have a high percentage of loss to follow-up as patients that just drop out the study, and it affects our study because it could cause loss of statistical power. So we are going to try to address this, or to avoid this, working with communities and trying to be sure that that we can build engagement, with community. And also we can have some patients that are not going to finish the study, so we need to plan the data analysis having in mind this. Yeah. And at the project level, so some of the risks that we identify is that we can have suboptimal quality of data collection, so problems with quality. Because remember that the community leaders are the ones that are going to collect the information from patients. But also we will have, because we need to connect with the health system, so we will have health workers also involved in the project, and maybe we can also have some problems with quality with them, especially because they have a lot of things to do, so we need to be sure that they are committed with the project. So to minimize the risk, we are going to be sure that we have a good strategy for training for community leaders and also for primary healthcare workers. We also want to be sure that the apps that we develop are user-friendly. Another risk is the commitment of community health volunteers, and especially especially healthcare workers. And for minimize this risk, we are going to work in community engagement again. Remember, we are working in 3 different areas, and we have more experience in one of the areas, and we know that the community is very engaged and committed, but we don't really know exactly with the other 2 areas. So it is possible that it's not that easy in those areas to have the community involved in the project and accept the project in the same way. So still here we also need to work in community engagement, and maybe go in advance and try to have a qualitative study or something to try to understand the dynamics in the community and see and learn what is the best way to engage them. We also can have safety risk for study personnel. Remember, we said that this is a very, we have a armed conflict in the region, in that area. So for minimize the risk, we need to be sure that the planning is, we need to plan very careful about the time, the areas where our study team is going to be working during the field work. And finally, another risk is the loss of data, especially because we are collecting data in apps and then sending to a server or something. So is it possible to have some loss of data? So we need to be sure that we have a good plan regarding backups, and also the use of paper forms to, some areas we have difficulty to transmit the information, and we don't want to lose the data, so we can use paperwork. And we don't have the second part of the homework.
privacy and confidentiality and everything. So
Okay.
it's okay. I mean, you don't have to have a clear demarcation. Very well done. First, let's give a big hand for the group. Yeah. So it's kind of a very good example that we see. We already start to see the different kinds of challenges that they face and what kind of mitigation measures they are looking. So this is exactly what we were trying to tell you, that it could be at the research level, it could be at a project management level, and this course looks at both of them, because you can't be successful in your research until your project plan works out well. So we are kind of marrying the two and trying to see how we can integrate the two together. Okay, so anybody has any questions? Yeah, Maria, hold on, Machi. Don't run away. You still haven't finished. Yeah. So they may have some questions, they may have some suggestions. So let's see what they have to say. Wafa.
Yeah, confidentiality is one of the
first,
most, yeah, the most
main,
important, yeah.
risk.
Also, I was looking at the buy-in that you have from community.
Yep.
Do you look at that as a risk? Is it a risk?
For
Yeah.
the project, yeah, because if we don't have the commitment
So
of the...
if you want it.
Yes.
So how does it become a risk? Not having it, yes. Not having it is the risk.
Yeah, I
but
think
when
it-
you have it, or
Oh.
you ensure that you have it, then it becomes a measure.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a matter of how it is framed. I think, but
Yes.
when she explained, she said one community we are comfortable, two communities we don't know what's going to happen, so we need to understand. So
Yeah. Sorry for the
These
confusion.
presentations are always just bullet points for us. It's just a matter of how you phrase it. That's
Okay.
fine.
Okay.
And as I said, this is just the beginning. You will be doing this thinking at every point in time. How does it impact quality? How does it impact safety? So, but I think you're on the perfectly right track. That's good. Yes. Okay. Let's have the next team. Yes. Tunisia. And just a naming convention. Don't make it very complicated. Maybe all your file names can just be your country name. And if you want exercise 1, exercise 2, something like that, so then we know where it is. In the end, it's going to be your same file building up. So your final product is what we are interested later on. But use the same file and just give Colombia. Then it becomes easy for us to track.
The possible risks to participants, measures to minimize the risk, and concerning the first part, the research level, we found 2 risks. First of all, the risk to induce psychological suffering and increase feeling of social stigma. For that, we should train all the involved team how to address patients before and during the interviews and how to protect their confidentiality. Also, we should ensure psychological support when needed by volunteers. The second risk is the lack of standardization between the 3 regions, because we will study we will compare 3 regions in the center of Tunisia, Gafsa, Sidi Bouzid, and Gasserine. And for that, we must involve the same trained staff for the 3 regions. Concerning the project management level, we have 2 risks also. The lack of confidentiality, and for that, we have to strict measures for interview conduct, preserving dignity of volunteers and storage of documents in a safe place with limited accesses. The second risk is the sensitive questions and feeling of embarrassment by volunteers. And for that, we have to guarantee full respect and strict confidentiality, as well as possibility to waive some answers when the volunteers request. The second part of this exercise is the evaluation of specific ethical issues. The first issue is the confidentiality also, and all patients will remain anonymous and will be referred to as an ID code in all the steps of the study. And their identity will not be disclosed in any of the publications. The second issue is the lack of information of participants and asking their agreement to participate in the informed consent. For that, informed consent including all the information needed. It should be mentioned, and we must clarify all the points in this informed consent. That's all. We basic language for the patient to understand the interview, the questions. We must give words, clear words for them.
Yes, yeah, because for example, it's happened to us that when you go to a different region of the country, when it's Spanish, the jargon that, I don't know, it's not a dialect, but even if it's the same Spanish word, the colloquialism it might mean something very different. So understanding what they're trying to say sometimes
for us,
is hard.
Tunisia is very small country, and the region is very near. So we have the same language. No, we haven't this. Maybe a few words, but we can adapt the questionnaire for any country, any region. Okay. Yes, Dorothy.
I just wanted to ask to make 2 or 3 points. One, especially with qualitative research, whether to just mention that you will use people who are trained in qualitative research. That's again a quality issue, not so much an ethical issue, but since you will be using interviewers, that they need to have a background already in qualitative research.
Yes.
The second thing that I just wanted to raise was that, especially since you are studying psychological issues, what if you find people who have issues, or during the questioning process, if you trigger psychological trauma, how will you deal with it? And whether that is something you need to also think through.
Yeah, I think we mentioned to ensure the support, meaning that we will send them to a psychologist or something.
Yeah, so that kind of thing needs to be thought through and have a protocol kind of thing in place, that you know what is going to be the mechanism to deal with something like that.
Okay.
And the third thing I just wanted to raise also is ancillary care. So for example, say you find somebody who has complications, or has a complication of the disease, or is having a problem at that point in time. Is it also our responsibility as researchers to have some kind of referral mechanisms in place? And I think that also for the first team, how do we deal with ancillary care? It's not directly part of your research, but you are incidentally finding somebody with complications or with problems, medical problems. Do you have a protocol in place to deal with them?
For them, they need to find some way, because you can't say, okay, they dropped out and then
Yes.
I cannot sit back and keep quiet. Yeah.
But I mean, in the protocol, in the selection criteria, we can, because in our case, we will choose only patients, for example, who are not with complicated lesions, and we even specified the time of scars, like starting from 6 months history of leishmaniasis. So maybe we can restrict.
Restrictive, you will not be able to get the right participants. So sometimes you need to also think bigger and say, okay, it doesn't matter. If I find these things, I have an obligation to refer them to the healthcare system. You can't do anything beyond that. You can only do what you can. But then to commit onto the protocol to say that these are possible things that we would be seeing, and then these are the measures that we are trying to, don't be too restrictive. Yeah, that can pose a big challenge for you.
Okay.
So they had something like volunteer support, psychological support, something like that you said, volunteers. But I think what Dorothy is saying is not, but you're referring them to some psychology clinic or to a psychiatric clinic or wherever, so then they can be taken care of there.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Just to extend that a little bit more also is taking care of researchers. So we do send people into the field, but are they equipped to handle people having issues, or really bringing up psychological? I say that from experience again. So we send people to interview. they come back with so much of emotional trauma, because just listening to people's stories is not easy to handle. So we have to deal with a way in which we can equip them to be able to handle the kind of stories that they would hear.
Yes, that's also interesting.
Yes, very nice.
Yes. Please use the mic.
Yeah, that's a good question. Her
Yeah.
question is, does it have
Yeah.
to be part of the protocol?
Or the project level only.
Yeah, so I would think a protocol, and if you're thinking to put it into the IEC or through an IEC committee, then if you spell these out and say you've thought them through, there's much higher chances of it getting cleared at the first go, rather than the IEC committee getting a feeling that you haven't thought through all these issues. So it's better to put them there and make a case for, I've thought these through, these are the various issues that could occur, and that you already have an answer to them, because these are the kind of things that the committee is going to raise.
So all of what you are discussing can go into a section on a risk-benefit analysis. In the section on ethics, you can have one on informed consent, one on risks versus benefits, and you can actually spell out everything right there. That would be nice. So all of what you're discussing here, you could clearly incorporate into the protocol. That's a good...
Yes, so for our protocol, we have put this risk, especially, for example, for the violence. So we have made clear that, for example, if it's getting too risky in an area, we are going to stop. So the funder knows that sometimes it's just not possible.
We are only focusing on what we will call just part of a work package that would only look at assessing the contextual factors and barriers and facilitators that influence adoption of WASH practices in the Islam areas that we are looking at. And these will now be the specific objectives that we'll be looking at. For this, the research design for us for this, or the approach that we want to use, is going to be cross-sectional, both qualitative and quantitative techniques. And we have 3 specific techniques that we'll be using. We would want to conduct systematic reviews, also conduct interviews, and after that we'll do surveys. We use this because of how we want to order the processes. So we would do the systematic review together with the interviews, and that would inform how we structure the surveys. So now this is what we have. We have a big one, both looking at the project level and the research level. For the project level, this is what we identified, especially for the systematic reviews. We would have to do like big global studies that have been done in these areas. And we know that sometimes there is limited access. It's not always easy for you to access some of this published data. So in case there is prohibition, there is limited access, what do you do? So we are saying that we need to allocate a lot of funds, because some of them you need to buy them. Okay, so that is the major thing that we found at the project level. Going to the research level, we'll look at the interviews and also the surveys. A few things have come up, so they might sound repetitive. The discrimination that was mentioned earlier on, as I said, we will do these hotspots. So by selection of a hotspot, then it means that you are a little different from the normal. So how do you mitigate that? Again, through sensitization and also community awareness, education, for them to know that we are identifying or selecting you for maybe long-term benefits from this study. That is one. And 2, we are also thinking that there could be psychological and also physical risk, both to our research assistants and then respondents. So we are talking about slum areas that are really secluded. Accessing these places can be difficult physically, and some of these places can also be, in terms of attacks or gang, whatever, we have those possibilities. And the psychological risk is about going to see the condition that people are living within. So you go and you start talking to people who do not have access to some of these things that you will be looking at as everyday luxuries in life. As a research assistant, they might come back with psychological issues. How do you deal with it? We are thinking of, again, training before they go. And for the communities, sometimes you live in a condition that you are comfortable with unless somebody comes asking you questions. Then it triggers you to go into another level as to the lack that you are living in. So sensitization, but again, from what you are saying, can we think of possible ways where in case it gets out of hand, you can refer them? Also, we were talking about poor quality of data, possibility of poor quality of data at the project level or even at the research level. Why? Because these slum areas are not really, what should I say, structured. People just live in just shanties, like small pockets living in there, and you cannot even number the houses. You might go into one, you are not even sure how many people are in there, how many households are in there. In that case, when you come up, it becomes very difficult to know the numbers that you have and specifically which places that you are picking it from. We are saying that enough preparation for data collection and also training of the research assistants will be helpful. A lot of these things are repeated under the survey because we might use the same processes in terms of discrimination, physical and psychological, and also all the things that we would do for the mitigation. So we had this big one to explain. Thank you.
The study, you find that people are very receptive and everything, but then they need some kind of infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
So they say, oh, we are fine. I'm all ready to be following all these, but I don't have this, I don't have that. So how is this research then going to influence them into getting, it's a matter of justice consideration.
In designing this proposal do you focus on just behavioral change without the infrastructure bit? Because providing enabling environment for the behavior change to thrive, you need to change infrastructure.
Because, well, maybe they are okay, and maybe they are not the ones that needs to be, sensitized. So who is the one discriminating them, and how do you
sensitize them?
that?
Yeah. So for the bigger proposal, what we were thinking of was working with community leaders, opinion leaders within these communities. So usually it's difficult for you as an outsider to just go there and start saying things. So but you need to engage the community. You need to do community entry, engage them before you can get access. It could sometimes not be even you, but once you sensitize the leaders, the information filters to the basics for the community. But I think that the entire community needs to be sensitized, because when it comes to your sampling, you don't know who you are likely to select. Yeah. So the entire community needs to know that this is happening. Okay. Yeah.
Phyllis, her question I think is like, okay, this is the population that is discriminated against. She's saying, who is the one who's actually discriminating them? What are you going to do about that community which will now, okay, your slum, you have cholera, I don't want to be having any association with you. So if there's another party that's actually doing the discrimination, how are you going to sensitize and how are you going to? So I think that is
that is big, right? The other one was easier. So I'm being discriminated against, so it's easy. But I'm the one that's yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Any suggestions? Yeah, but we will keep thinking about that. Yeah, by the time we will be leaving here, I'll give you some inputs. Anyway, yeah.
The discrimination is for the interviews or when we put that as intervention, because it has different implications. I mean, in the interview, perhaps you don't really need to think of the third party, but you need to ensure that the privacy, the confidence. Sorry. Yeah. For if it's the interview data collection, then the one you need to protect is that then they would not be discriminated because of the interview you connect. So it's more privacy and confidentiality. But if it is in the implementation phase, then you need to think and also desensitize the party who discriminate them.
Yeah. So that's a good point. Yeah, Franklin, you want to say something?
I mean, contribute. Because the hotspots are many and we cannot use all the hotspots, we're going to select some of the hotspots. So the question is, why select some? Or what's the basis for selecting these hotspots and not the others? So I think that's where the discrimination is coming from. Okay. And that's why we're saying that perhaps when we sensitize the households during these hotspots, then that should be able to take away that discrimination, because they also understand, because they're all within the same hotspots. Yes.
I want to just extend that a little bit and ask, is it an ethical issue also that you are selecting only some hotspots to study and not the others? Especially when you will do interventions, I think it's something to consider.
Yeah, so we were talking about that. Maybe he would.
Okay. So what we intend to do is to select some of the hotspots to help us come up with the strategies, the intervention. And then as part of co-designing this intervention, those that were not part of the initial process will be involved later for us to ensure that there is acceptability in terms of this new intervention we've actually designed. So these are the ones that were, let's say, discriminated, will then later contribute towards co-designing the intervention.
Yeah. But what we were saying was that because we took that phase out in terms of an objective, we have exactly. So we are not focusing on the intervention for this exercise. So we decided not to include all those bits of activities and the possibility of all the risks that are associated with them. That's why we took them out. But we had those discussions. Yeah.
I mean, if you looked at the intervention and you still decided I'm going to do intervention only in some and not in the others, then there is an ethical issue, right? Then what will you do is at the end of the study, if you find that that intervention is helpful, then you need to also provide intervention to the control group, right? So yeah, I can understand we are only taking bits and pieces, but I hope the others are getting the point. So they are now exploring, and then they come up with an intervention. If at the level of intervention, again they discriminated, and then they said, I'm only using some of the hotspots, leaving the others, then we have a big ethical question. Why are we choosing only them? Why are we leaving them like that? Because we're trying to study the differences. Does intervention work or doesn't work? So if the intervention works, then there's an ethical obligation to also extend it to the control things. So yeah, so you kind of get a flavor when you do it at different levels, how the risk becomes different. So I think that's the basis for this. And as I said, this is just the very beginning. And this is a question you will keep asking through every session. Does it impact ethics? Does it impact data quality? And you have to go on adjusting till you are completely satisfied that you have reached a good amount of thinking and mitigation measures. Okay? Okay, so this is just a beginning discussion. So 2 groups have been presented. So these 2 groups will be the ones to start tomorrow or in the next session. So then we can kind of catch up, right? Okay, so there's a very short session now, about 20-25 minutes, just an open discussion on informed consent. We decided to have this because in all the GHRP courses, we see there are a lot of questions when it comes to informed consent. So you have seen the video. And there are 2 components in the video. One is about what contents should go into your informed consent. So in our template, though we are not going to do an exercise on developing an informed consent, we still left it because it will be good for you to develop your informed consent form. So one part of it is how you develop your informed consent form. The other part is about the process of the informed consent. So do you have any questions? This is the time for discussion on informed consent. Yes?
Our study participant are inmates, the health staff in the prison, and the other staffs in the prison.
So sometimes we have confusion who our study participant is. And much against the clinical research is not just that participant alone. For us, we have others. And many of us, I think it's the healthcare providers themselves who become the participants. And that's why you started looking at the risk of the healthcare participants. They are not only participating, but they are in a way also the study participants themselves, and therefore we are kind of exposing them to risk. So I would like to actually, yeah, thank you, that I have assigned to, and then if I have a control group, I may not be doing anything, but then I'm also collecting data from them. For not doing anything, I'm still collecting data from them, and they need to know that they are controls. So a lot of people also tend to ignore. They say, anyway, we're not doing anything on them. You're not doing anything on them, but aren't you collecting their data for your analysis? So you need to be sure that if you have control groups like this, that you have forms designed specifically for them to say that you're not going to be part of this. Nevertheless, we are going to collect data from you, and this data is also going to be analyzed. Many times we see healthcare workers in the system. We do health systems research, we do a lot of research related to, and we ask them questions about the senior management. We ask them questions about how's your health ministry, how's your governorate, do you get kind of support, and they may give you answers otherwise. I don't know how much risk we are posing to them by way of asking these kind of sensitive questions. So sometimes it can be healthcare providers who are your participants. And then at times maybe then you also involve the senior management itself. So to what extent these people are going to be involved and what kind of data you're going to collect will help you design the kind of informed consent form. You may not even have one, you may even have multiple informed consent forms in your kind of study. So the question we would like you to ask is, who is my participant? Am I collecting data from this participant? If yes, should I ask for an informed consent? If yes, what should the contents of the informed consent be? That's the first question you need to ask. Okay? The second one, I'm only going to use this one slide. First question is, do I have to do an informed consent at all? Or am I not going to do an informed consent? And who do you think will make this decision? Yes? Can you use the microphone?
It's the review board.
Yes. Right? So sometimes also it happens, the researcher decides, but this is only just minimal risk study, so maybe it's not necessary to have an informed consent form, and they don't design an informed consent form, right? So you need to ask for, so the first and foremost is there a need for informed consent, right? If the answer is no, there is no need, then it means that this is one of those studies which can have an informed consent waiver. But that waiver will have to be decided by the ethics committee. But you decide, no, I am going to have an informed consent. Then the question arises in your kind of studies, am I going to do it at a community level or am I going to do it at an individual level? Is it practically feasible to do at an individual level is one of the questions. Is it meaningful to do it at an individual level? So there may be situations where, like, I think the classical example is Dhoni's study where they are putting or sending in the mosquitoes, the Wolbachia mosquitoes into the population. You definitely cannot go around asking everybody, and there will be a lot of people who will not consent to it, but they have no choice. So here's a situation where we are not looking at individual autonomy, but we are looking at a common good. And therefore we are asking for community consent. So there may be situations where it's neither feasible nor is it practically meaningful, and then you will have something called as a gatekeeper consent. But this is also something that you as a researcher cannot decide. This is also something that the ethics committee will have to approve. Or maybe, no, it is not appropriate for community to consent. It's about individual data that we are collecting. Therefore, we need to get an individual consent. Then comes the question of having an individual informed consent form. So it's like non-excludable interventions where it is really appropriate that every individual who's participating in this particular study needs to give an informed consent. So while you're looking at your study, you need to really see, can I ask for a waiver, or can I do a community consent, or is it necessary for me to do an individual informed consent? If yes, who are my study participants? What kind of data I'm collecting? And how is it that I'm going to be doing informed consent? So this is very different from a clinical trial kind of a thing where you have just the participant is actually the true patient who is your participant. It's so straightforward and easy. You can just design it. Here you will have some challenges.
Can I add a bit?
Yes, please. Please go ahead.
Because in
your study is very interesting and you can contribute.
It's because in our experience, even individual consent can give a risk.
Okay.
As Farah mentioned, this is a community intervention. We deploy mosquitoes into the community. First, we have individual consent. We ask 95% agree that they agree for the mosquito deployment, and even with other neighbors, households, it can create tension because you're supposed not to agree or you're supposed to agree. Those conflicts cannot be resolved without a consensus at the community level. So in the end, I think for that kind of intervention, community consent, when they reach consensus together, when they know and if they don't agree, they know the consequences, and the community later on agree, it's somewhat ensure the autonomy of the community and also with individual within community, because then the potential conflict can be mitigated.
Give another example to highlight the same thing, where both gatekeeper consent as well as individual consent probably needs to be taken, is in the hospital setting. So we went to individuals and we said, we would like to interview you, and we did an informed consent with them and they agreed to participate, but they got into trouble with the senior management because they had not been informed and we did not do a consent process with them. We directly went to individuals and there was conflict between employees and the employer. So that's another.
So then in that kind of a situation, maybe you will start here. You start up on the hierarchy and tell them, look, this is what we are going to do, and we are going to do on your staff. There's possibility that we get information against the management, and that's also something that we will include. And is that okay with you? So I think we are all learning. All of us, we have issues. So if you did not ask these people, but then you published a report only doing from the health workers and saying that there are issues at the healthcare system, can be one. And the kind of example, conflict within the family, conflict between neighbors are things that you don't anticipate. And it can even be multiple levels. It's like sometimes there can be vested interest for that one person. Could be like in collision with the research team may just say yes. So you may want to go to multiple levels to see that there's really community consensus when you're doing these kind of studies where it's non-excludable. You can't exclude. I can't send the mosquito only to house 1 and not to house 2, right? So the question, when it's non-excludable, then it becomes, or I'm doing something like a wash intervention. The water pipes, I'm changing something, I'm adding chlorine, some people may like, some people may not like, but I have no option. I cannot exclude one family because it's for that entire community. So in these kind of non-excludable situations, I think you will be in the best position to decide, and it's better that you do. This is where stakeholder mapping also comes into question. Who are all having a stake on this? Should I have to get consent from these various stakeholders? So I see that informed consent in these kind of studies is much more challenging than in clinical research, where it's just directly dealing with the participants and just getting their information. And it can be very different in different settings. Yeah. So, yes.
I was just wondering, because I am not very familiar with the community consent. So what we did in the past was just write a letter to the senior management. Does that count as an informed consent, or do they have to go to the process of, the having to explain the study, and whether they'd have to sign? Do they have to go through that process as well?
In the end, I think it's a good practice. If nothing is documented, nothing happened. right? So that's a dictum, like no matter what you do. So even if you did a community consent, then it's like, what information did you share? Who did you share it with? And then did they receive that information? Did they actually understand? So I think you need to have a document, and it cannot be verbal. There's some way that you need to have this process. Yeah.
Is it possible to see how?
I think the first thing that we need to do when we want to do the community or collective consent, we need to know the decision-making process in those groups and the communities, so that as a collective, as a community, they know how to decide and reach to the consensus. It might depend from community to communities, so we cannot somewhat generalize that this is something that we have to do. But it depends on how they reach consensus as community. We have go through those processes, provide information needed to do those things, and then when they have consensus, then we can ask who will be the representative of the community. Should everybody sign, or can be only one person? It depends on their decision.
Yeah. You kind of can map this process and get this process documented to say that you first of all approach, maybe under a big tree, you got everybody together, everybody listened, and then as a second step, maybe you had just a small pool of people, and then finally it was agreed that there will be one person who is going to be signing on everybody's behalf. So it's kind of serially documenting this whole process, on giving dates, and so then it's like a true story that you are building. So should somebody actually ask you what you did, you can define this process. But my fear is that if we don't document and then we are gone from that site, nobody will ever know how this whole thing happened. Yeah. But this is something that needs to be explored. Like the Columbia team already said that they would like to do something exploratory to understand their community, because they only work with one community and they are not sure about the other two. So they are actually doing some preparatory work before they could actually decide how to go about. Yeah. Any other questions from your session on informed consent? I thought this will be like good to have some discussion. Yes?
In our practice in the field, what we have is the certification. Is that considered a community consent?
What is certification?
For example, your participants are from indigenous people. So we get certification from National Commission for Indigenous People. So is the certificate from them already considered the community consent?
No.
Permissions are different.
Yeah.
Permissions are different and consent is different.
So we have two things here. So one is actually even a permission to work with these kind of communities. So what you're talking about is something like I write to them and they say, okay, you can go ahead to do with your research. But that's entirely different from actually getting these indigenous people to say for themselves whether they would like to be researched or not researched. So I think there's this session on oversight in your online, where it's not just the ethics committee. You may have a scientific committee, you may have a lot of local clearances that you may have to do. Could be, like you said, and some other country they said there's a ministry for tribal affairs. So if you did something on tribal affairs, you need to get a clearance from the tribal affairs. So it varies from countries to countries. These are clearances, these are approvals that you can do research. But that doesn't mean that you can do without their consent. Consent is about that population, that participant saying, yes, you can do it on me. Yeah.
Just wanted to add and say sometimes that we treat the informed consent like a permission. Yes. So we don't treat it like a process of really informing and taking people along, but more of getting permission and signature. So just, that made me think of that.
Don't look at it like a simple but look at it like a real process. Yeah. I think this was also emphasized in the online course. Yeah. Yes?
I'm just confused about this collective consent because I never heard of this. So I'm wondering if, what I understood is that only one person or some community leaders who will sign or will give his consent.
See, you need to understand that this in situations where an individual informed consent is not feasible or is not meaningful, because I cannot exclude them. So there are only exceptional situations where you will go for a community consent. By and large, the norm is only the individual consent. But in certain situations where you cannot fulfill an individual consent, you go for a community consent. And in that, as like Dhoni explained, it differs from community to community. Like here what they did is like they first met with a round of people and then another round, and then finally they decided, okay, on behalf of all of us, this one particular individual is like our leader and he can sign the consent. Maybe in your setting it's not like that. So this will differ depending upon the cultural settings.
But just in case, so the individuals know about the study or not?
They
just information they know?
Yes, they know.
Okay.
It starts from the bottom, from a big picture, and then goes up to somebody taking that gatekeeper role.
Yeah. For example, in our study, these mosquito studies, we had the collective consent at the village level, but then from village to village, the one who sign can be different. In one village can be a government representative because they decide to do so. In some other village, several members of the community representing the community. In one other village, community leaders. So it depends on who they think can represent their community.
Yes, Phyllis.
Yeah, I just wanted to share an experience working with commercial sex workers. So living in a brothel, so this is the space they live in, they are all in there. In that case, they didn't want to consent individually. They wanted the pimp to consent for all of them. So the male figure who is in charge of the brothel, they said he can consent because they weren't comfortable consenting individually because of confidentiality issues. So the pimp did collectively for all of them, and they knew about the study. You will still go through the processes of letting them understand the basics, but they say that they would not do the consenting individually. The pimp did it on their behalf. So there are cases like that.
Yeah, but that can be a risk as well, because the pimp, just to protect his business and everything, could just have an vested interest and then put everybody into the study. But in the end, one thing is that whatever be your process is something that you need to submit to the ethics committee, and the ethics committee needs to know what kind of process you are doing. So if it's a situation like in Ghana and the ethics committee says, oh no, I'm not going to approve of a pimp doing that, they may then say this perhaps is not acceptable. So the reason why the ethics committees have to be as close to the study population as possible, because they understand all the nuances of the population, right? Yes?
Okay, in our research study, what we do is we get the individual informed consent to each and every participant. My question is, do we also need to get the community consent even if we have already the informed consent? The individual consent.
In some situations, maybe no.
No, not anymore.
Maybe no.
Okay.
No. But maybe in some situations, because there are some communities where the leaders can be all powerful, and then you don't get anything written, but you engage them. That's why we keep talking a lot about community engagement. So then sometimes what happens is this one person can become completely anti to your research and can destroy your research. He or she may not be the decision-making person. Individuals would have consented, but you may have somebody who's so in these kind of situations, you need to find a way of how you will engage. I think they also have a very good experience out of that. Dhoni?
Yeah, I think again it depends of the risk you pose to the community. As an example, we have a high rate of approval individually, but because one very focal person, and he has the skills to mobilize people, they oppose us, so that even they give us a legal notice that there will be legal consequences. So again, it depends on what kind of risk you put to that community. If it is, again, in the risk benefit analysis, you have to think of that. The power play in the community, the power structures, how they relate to others. If it is okay with individual consent, that is, it's fine. But if it has consequences, creating potential conflict, then you might need to think of also the community consent.
Yeah, Doni, can I also ask? I'm wondering, this just got me thinking. So, we also conducted an entomological survey, and then we did it. We gave individual consents. I would like to get the suggestion whether this warrants community consent, because the problem is we had the barangay health workers or the village health workers do it for us. We were with them. So just a context, the barangay health workers give the community vitamins and a lot of free things. So when the barangay health workers did the survey, it seemed like the community did not have a choice whether they would allow that study in their house, because if they refuse, they might think that
this is a power game that you're talking of, where the person who's actually taking the consent has that power, and then this is clearly a vulnerable group which cannot say no because of power equations. And this is also something maybe your ethics committee already understands, that maybe these people are not the ones who should be. Then you need to think of having some independent researchers who have no direct role to play with them on a day-to-day basis. And this is how you circumvent this problem. Yes. So you see, we just allocated half an hour, but look at the kind of discussions that come up, because we always see the informed consent is very, very interesting and very challenging. We have to close for tea, but before that, I just wanted to tell you that comprehension is a very big issue. As much as information delivery is a big issue, many times we assume the participant already understood. And this has got two implications. One, they don't understand it fully well in the beginning, and then they start troubling you later. Or the other is that you just took it for granted and they really didn't give you a consent, either because of power or because of whatever reasons, you just have it signed, but it's not a true consent. So either way, it can be a problem. So when you're free, just look at this flow and you will understand how you can overcome this problem of comprehension. And in a number of situations, what we see is there's something called as an implied consent. I'm sending out a questionnaire on internet, or I'm sending it to people. The fact that they respond automatically means that they are consenting. You may sometimes not go ahead and do an individual detailed consent, but it's like an implied consent. But you can put it into your protocol to say, we're not going to do an informed consent, and if they answer these questions, it's understood that they are, they're giving their consent. Or it could be like a telephone survey, totally anonymous. I just pick up the call and I ask 100 people about it. You can't do an informed consent in this kind of situation. So there are quite some situations where the nature of study, the surveys that you are thinking of, you may not be doing it, and you may have good reasons why you may not be doing it. But this again, don't forget that big chart I showed you. Whatever be the decision is something that needs to come from the ethics committee. Be it waiver, be it this, be it that, anything has to come from them. But you can think through which is most appropriate in your kind of situation. Right? We will have lot more questions, and then we can, Dorothy was right. I said, but Dorothy, everybody has done, they're all researchers, they all know informed consent. But she said, no, Vara, let's have a session on informed consent. And we see it's very, very useful. It's not just listening to that video, it's like sharing a lot of experiences. Maybe I think this is one thing you could do on your discussion forum. just post some scenarios and instigate people to kind of respond, and then you can do a lot more of teaching there. Okay, so we have a half an hour break for coffee, and then we come back at 3:30. On the dot. Can we go back to the first presentation of the morning on this one? I think your next activity is listing all the essential documents that you would need for your study. Listing the essential documents. We're not going to go into protocol and details and informed consent into details, but looking at your study, what are all the essential documents that you think? It could even be like SOPs, because you already started saying, I would like to train, I would like to standardize procedures. So you can think of whatever list of documents that you need to prepare. Yes, Maria.
Sorry, I know before the break.
Not this
but
one.
I was listening
Risk
to
assessment.
you, and then I have a question.
Risk
So do
assessment.
you allocate like a budget line for all those activities? Because it looks like it's a very time-consuming process if you have to involve all the stakeholders and all these things. So how do you handle for the planning of the project? I'm not thinking the research perspective, but the
test.
planning perspective. So how do you
Exercise
handle
two.
that?
Yeah.
Which what? The
All the engagement with the stakeholders.
yes, of course, it should be part of the budget in the project, and also the timelines.
This is also bringing us to the importance of why we need to have a project management. See, it's going beyond the research itself. So you need to, I think these are all kind of studies which really justify having a scientific track and a very technical, an administrative track. Phyllis, you see the reason now? And even to call these people on board and having these meetings and everything organized is a lot more work. So it goes way beyond a researcher, and you need the reason why you need to have somebody who manages your project, and you consider your research not just as a research, also as a project. Yeah. So this is the instruction. We haven't given you a lot more details, but you can think through. I need to have a proposal. Do I need an informed consent? If yes, how many informed consents? Who are my study participants? Do I have 1, 2? Am I going to have a community? So start looking at what are the different essential documents you need to prepare. But before that, half an hour coffee break.
Okay, this is our discussion from Indonesia about the essential document that we gonna use in our protocol study. So we divided it into 3 kind of essential document. The first one is the pre-document, and then the second one is the during document, and then the third one is the after document. We propose questionnaire and also in-depth interview guidelines in the study documents. And also for regulatory document, we gonna keep the approval from IRB and also permission from related institution. And also because like this is not real like health research in a health facility, so we're gonna ask for permission that coming from Law and Human Rights Minister, and also from each province that we're gonna conduct the study. And also for the study staff and contract, we're gonna keep the staff contract, grant agreement, and also contact list in a field for the during research. Next, this is the document that are going to use in the during research. We're gonna collect the IT participant list and also all signed ICF, which is we planning to have 3 kind of informed consent form, which is because we are planning to intervention in inmates and also in health workers and also in the staff of prisons, and also we're gonna keep the field questionnaires, the transcript, and also audio recording also collected. For the respondents, we're gonna keep the essential correspondency. I mean this one, as essential correspondency between research team and field team. This is the after document. We're gonna keep the report, dissemination report, manuscript, and also policy brief. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And this is, give big applause first. Thank you. Is there anything that need to be added in the essential document for a mixed method?
Maybe the training logs?
The training logs. So, that should be here during the will you do a training?
We're planning to do training so before.
And also evaluation of training?
Yeah.
Okay. So training logs will be here. And what else do you think that it will helps the study to document and also reconstruct if there is any audit? Because as Farah mentioned, if you don't write it, then it never happens. So do you think this is adequate to document all the process of the study if we want to do a study in a prison?
The previous
Phyllis?
slide. The previous slide.
Oops.
That's fine. I was looking for the permission because it's a prison. I wanted to see the permission, but it's covered. I said that because it's a restricted institution, I wanted to see the permission, and it's there.
Maybe the staff CV, because they need to be qualified.
One thing that it's good to be here is that staff CV, PIs, co-PIs, and also team members. Okay. Any other inputs, Phyllis?
Do you have the budget?
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Maybe it's in the protocol.
Budget will not be in the protocol, but those should be somewhere here.
Trying to understand, I don't know.
Just like imagine, like the job description, and also the time deliberation for the field staff, especially.
So it's like roles and responsibilities, and also benefits and those kind of things. Right. Okay. Any others? Uh-huh.
It's like during, it's like post. I mean,
Yeah.
this is the kind of thinking we would like to follow. It's not like random here and there. If you look at it systematically, then we kind of, get. So I think that, and we seem to be choosing the right thing for the first presentation. I don't know, just happening like that. So that's really very, very nice.
So thank you, Team Indonesia. And I think now we move to Colombia.
Hello? Hello?
Okay. Okay, so ours is not structured. So we have in our list of essential documents, I think more or less some of the ones already mentioned, the protocol, the IRB approvals. We have a log of responsibilities for all the study team, the communications in general, the contracts and the agreements we call with external parties because we have a lot. The informed consent forms and the signed informed consents, the CV, the reports, SOPs, the data collection tools, and I think here it is a very generic term, but we will have some paper forms. We also will have, for the data that is collected directly in the apps, so there will be only in the database. No? So that's maybe one of the difference that we might have. So we might have some paper forms, but probably most of the document would be in the app. So it would be straight to the database. Agreements with the community health volunteers. So this is something that we were discussing today. So how to make sure the disclaimers of all the roles are clear, and the training logs for all the study team. And we didn't put it, but then the budget too.
Okay, thank you. Applause. It's getting low energy in the afternoon. So, yeah, I think if we can also, I mean, a good thing if we identify the critical steps in the study processes and identify for each of the critical steps what kind of documentation that we need to put there, and then we also have a more structured thinking of those essential documents. Right. Any comments from other groups? So there won't be any field questionnaire because you already put in the apps. And I don't know, I'm asking for, because in clinical trial we have this electronic CRF and all those kind of thing. What do you have in say about that? Whether we should put also things in the essential document or not?
If you're going to be using an electronic CRF, then certainly it's an essential document. But I think in most of these kind of situations, they don't really use those kind of thing. But I think in this situation, their MAP itself is like data capturing and data transferring. There are lots of challenges with, we think electronic, as we go electronic, we think we are getting better, but then actually we are not getting better. We seem to be facing a lot of unexpected challenges with electronic systems. So as much as we would love to have electronic systems, it's like, it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue. We had in one of those studies 10 sites and 10 different problems. So countries where there's no internet access to countries that have very high security, very high levels of firewalls and everything, that you can't transmit anything whatsoever. So the spectrum of problem that we faced was just totally unimaginable. So I think it's also important that we test and be sure that these kind of systems work in our settings. I'm sure you did it.
And also in the risk analysis, you mentioned about mitigation for those, and you mentioned about backups and also paper-based, and that should be also then put it there.
So yes, so that project, it's very complex. So we have faced a lot of issues with that. So yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. So maybe for sharing the experience, so we try to make the paper forms to look very similar to the data that is collected in the apps. But for example, we had to deal with things with internet connection. So So it can store, so there's enough space in the phone for storing the data and the pictures until they get into a place where they can get connected to internet. Also with not the data transfer, so how it goes into the database. So it is also not a simple thing to design, because we thought that was something very straightforward, and then everybody understands how a database should look like, but no. And then we also had, when we got with the engineers that developed this, and then they exported the data, it was like how we can analyze this thing. So in the piloting of this, it takes a lot of time to get it running. It's not simple.
And you need to have SOPs because data loss or problems with the apps can be any times, and you need to SOP where you should switch to a paper-based data collection, or in your case, what's the situation?
Okay, so we had to make an amendment to the protocol, because the initial plan was to go straight to use the apps, because they were developed before in another project, and we thought they were ready to escalate. So we were just planning just to adopt the technology. And when we found out is that no, they needed to be adjusted. So we had to design the paper forms and start collecting the data in paper until they get with the quality we need for analyzing. So for now, it's paper records.
So another document, protocol amendments should be also put there, right? So that's something that we have to
Maria,
miss.
can we just be updated? What data are you collecting? Sorry about this question. Yeah.
So the project is about estimating the hidden burden of the disease.
Okay.
So we have several strategies that they include, I'm going to explain the human part, because we had also the collection of vector data. But in terms of human participants, then when we have something that is like a prediction score for identifying who is likely or not to have leishmaniasis, so that's one of the data we're collecting. And then there is also effectiveness of treatment, so adverse events, adherence to treatment, and therapeutic response. So it's a lot of data we're collecting.
And your participants are
basically CL patients. So we cutaneous leishmaniasis patients in rural areas of Colombia. So we have 3 sites.
Okay.
One that is running, and the other 2 that are going to start next year. So it's a little bit challenging.
But it's a nice study. I'll just comment. Do you have a master list of where you sample your participants from? Yeah.
Yeah, you mean like enrollment log? So the ones that we screen?
Yeah.
Yes, we have. Okay, good.
Yeah, I mean, when we discuss, we see that more and more essential document that we should put there. I mean, now we mentioned about protocol amendments, and then all those correspondence with the IRBs, those kind of things. So, Farah.
So one of the challenges is also like the one who collects the data likes that instrument to be in a certain fashion, because it's convenient for them to collect the data from the participant. But the one who analyzes the data likes the data to be presented in a completely different format, because it should be friendly for them. So one of the challenges that we see with all these apps are we can only satisfy one of the two. Are we going to be friendly to the data collector, or are we going to be friendly to the data analyzer? And this is a challenge. Unless you have systems within where it collects in this form and then it displays in another form, I don't know, maybe that is possible. But these are also challenges that we face. So in the old paper style, everything is designed to the suitability of whoever is going to use that particular document. So the collector, we have everything related to that. But the CRF will be like very different in another fashion. So the more we are technology driven, the more we actually seem to face these kind of challenges. That is also something that we need to bear in mind. And errors happen because it's not friendly to one or the other party. Right? So we need to see how we can minimize these kind of data errors as well.
Thank you very much. So now we move to Ghana.
But what we have is study protocol, approval from the Research Ethics Committee, information sheets for all the 4 different groups of participants, contracts and confidentiality agreement, which will spell out the responsibilities of the field workers, and also for them to go according to the training protocols. We also attach training protocols, the budget, the CVs of the PIs and co-PIs, as well as the staff as well, to demonstrate that we've got the ability to carry out this research. And then data collection tools before, and then once they are completed, will be part of the essential documents that will be documented. Okay, so briefly, this is, I think that from the feedback we've got, this will be modified and accordingly. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So if you see this list, this is all for the implementation documents. So if you're now thinking to the during and after, what do you want to add on that?
For the after, the technical reports, interim reports, policy briefs, and so on. Yes. So many of these would actually, the completed informed consent form will be part of after as well. And correspondence with the ethics committee will also be part of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will you collect data?
Yes.
Okay. And the tools for data collection is. No, I mean the list. Just mention that.
Data collection tools. But you want the specifics?
No, it's just a list, and also during the data collection, then there is a field whether you use a paper-based questionnaires or those kind of things, because that's also part of the essential document. Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we can also have this quick discussion.
We just said in line of the training that you received online, prepare a list of essential documents. And one of the things we also wanted to see is the structured way of thinking. So there's no harm. If you didn't put it and you thought it's only the this is perfectly fine. But I think the video clearly says that you have 3 different phases. You start these documents and then you go on building and then you go on building. So we would like you to think in that line. But there's no harm. Maybe we can be more clear in our instructions. But we also were trying to test.
You know, we can always go back to the videos, to pick. We actually went in, but I think more clarification will be very helpful. Yeah.
And also, when we the definition of essential document is all documents that helps what's the reconstruction of the study processes.
It's just like we do like thinking if somebody's going to audit us, what you need to have it ready. So yes, so that helps like thinking if somebody's going to review what I'm doing, how can I ensure that I did everything correctly? That's it. Yeah.
In the next one, we won't say during, but we say if essential documents is going to be a means of reconstruction, what do you think are the list of essential documents? So it's kind of testing. At the same time, that gives you a clue that you need to cover everything. We modify our question. Thank you, Phyllis. Thank you. We want to be very application oriented. So we really want the participants to think through along those lines. Very good question. We'll do that.
Okay, any other comments or inputs for this? No? Okay. So I think big applause for Ghana.
Thank you.
And it's 4:30 almost, so we move to the next exercise, which is data collection tools. You have half an hour time to do that, and I already saw that Phyllis and also Franklin already did some of that in the previous session, but you can continue working on that. Yeah. Thank you very much.
You could define whether it's quantitative, whether it's qualitative. If it's qualitative, is it originating from surveys, self-surveys, interview? You can go a little more deeper. So then this will help you when you're actually preparing all those tools, right?